Elena stood in the soft morning light, her hand hovering over the battered box and thick envelope that had materialized on her doorstep. King pressed close at her knee, ears forward, tail low but wagging, anxious, expectant. Bella remained in the living room, her head lifted, watching every movement, her eyes dark pools of hope and weariness. The puppies stirred sleepily in their nest of towels, the sick one already wrapped in King's carefully retrieved blanket, its shallow breathing a quiet metronome in the background. The box was worn, the cardboard peeling at the corners, but it was sealed with careful tape. Elena's heart thudded as she knelt to retrieve it, her fingers brushing against the faded ink of her own address, written in a shaky, unfamiliar hand. The envelope was heavier, its flap sealed with the same meticulousness, her name just "To the One Who Shelters," scrawled in looping, desperate letters. Elena hesitated. She glanced down at King, who nudged the box with his nose, then looked back at her with such solemn insistence that she could not help but feel this was meant to be. She carried both inside, set them gently on the dining table, and with trembling hands slid open the envelope first. Inside, a letter unfolded, a handful of pages, ink blotted in places, as if written in haste or under duress. Elena sank into a chair, the morning sun slanting across her lap, and began to read. To the One Who Shelters. If you're reading this, it means you found our dogs. I am so sorry. I am so sorry for what I have done. You see, I never wanted to give them up. They are not just animals. King and Bella, they are family. And the puppies, I helped deliver them into this world myself. Every one of them has a place in my heart. But this town, our street, our neighbors, they made it impossible. It started last fall after King saved the Miller girl from drowning in the creek. She wandered off, fell through the ice. King jumped in, dragged her out. The whole town called him a hero for a day. Then the complaints began. The dogs bark at night. The yard smells. Too many animals in one house. Someone will get bitten. They called City Hall, the police, and animal control. There were letters, threats, and even a petition to have the dogs taken away. We were fined. The HOA sent legal notices. Our landlord threatened to evict us if we didn't get rid of the problem. No one cared that the problem had saved a life. I tried to fight it. My daughter cried herself to sleep every night, terrified we'd lose the only friends she trusted. The last straw was an anonymous note shoved under our door. Next time, the dogs might not be so lucky. That's when I knew we had to act. I thought foolishly, maybe cruelly, that if I left them by the highway, someone kind might stop. Someone might do what I could not. I couldn't bring myself to call the pound. I couldn't watch them die in a cage. Elena paused, her hands trembling as she tried to absorb the cascade of anguish and fear stitched through every line. She could almost see the family in her mind. A desperate parent, a frightened child. The dogs who had once been local heroes now transformed into pariahs by the unforgiving churn of small-town politics. The letter continued, more ragged now, ink smeared as if from tears. Please forgive me. Please don't blame King or Bella. They only ever tried to protect us. If you can, if you have the means, give them a home, even if just for a while. They deserve so much more than the fate I gave them. I will never forgive myself. But maybe, if you're reading this, there is still a chance for them. Please save these souls, a mother who failed her family. Elena felt the room tilt. She pressed a fist to her lips, trying to quiet the storm inside her, rage at the town's cruelty, sorrow for the mother's impossible choice, and a fresh, raw admiration for the dogs themselves. All of it tumbled together in a flood that left her gasping. She glanced up at King, who watched her with unwavering trust. and at Bella, whose quiet, noble presence seemed even more heroic now. With shaking hands, Elena opened the box. Inside, she found the evidence of the family's love: a worn collar with the name King engraved, a handful of toys, a faded photograph of a little girl with her arms around Bella's neck, both of them grinning in the late summer sun. Tucked beneath the toys was a final note, written in the same hand, but hurried, the words underlined in desperate ink: "Please forgive us. Please save them." For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. Elena stared at the tokens of a broken family, her own heart cracking open under the weight of their story. In the distance, she could already imagine the voices of neighbors, the cold logic of ordinances and rules. She could feel the risk swirling around her, the knowledge that to keep these dogs was to invite trouble. But as she looked again at King, who had never once left his family, not even at the end, she understood that her decision was already made. She wiped her tears and rose, gathering the letter and photograph, pressing them to her chest as if to anchor herself to the promise she felt blooming there. Bella padded over, resting her head on Elena's knee, the puppies wriggling as if sensing the shift in the air. Elena steeled herself, vowing to protect the dogs at any cost, even if it meant facing down her neighbors, the law, or the town itself. Sunday mornings in the suburb were usually marked by quiet routines: the distant hum of lawnmowers, the sweet drift of syrup from kitchens, the soft shuffle of neighbors fetching newspapers in slippers and robes. But for Elena, this morning was taut with anxiety, a fragile silence, straining to hold back the chaos that threatened to shatter the peace she had carved out for her little family of survivors. She had risen early, tending to the puppies as sunlight slanted through the blinds, casting stripes of gold on the living room floor. Bella nursed her litter with gentle patience, her eyes occasionally drifting to Elena, as if to reassure her that for a moment they were safe. King stood sentry by the front window, every muscle tense, scanning the sleepy street for signs of trouble. It wasn't long before the trouble found them. Elena had just finished mixing a fresh bowl of food when she heard the sharp click of high heels on her front walk, a sound far too purposeful for the gentle meanderings of a Sunday morning. She looked up to see Mrs. Gable, her next-door neighbor, standing ramrod straight by the mailbox, lips pressed into a thin, determined line. Mrs. Gable was legendary in the neighborhood for her ferocity. HOA newsletters seemed written with her in mind, and no infraction, however minor, escaped her vigilant gaze. Elena felt her chest tighten as Mrs. Gable leaned over the fence, eyes narrowing at the sight of Bella through the window. The woman's face puckered with suspicion, and her gaze sharpened further as she caught a glimpse of the puppies tumbling over one another in the makeshift pen. With a practiced flick, Mrs. Gable drew her phone and snapped several photos, her fingers moving with cold efficiency. Elena opened the door, heart pounding, forcing a polite smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Gable. Is there something I can help you with?" Mrs. Gable didn't bother with pleasantries. "Are you aware, Elena, that this neighborhood has strict regulations about animal ownership, especially for unregistered dogs, and certainly for litters?" She brandished her phone like a badge. "I'm calling Animal Services, and if you can't produce paperwork, I'll be forced to notify the HOA. This isn't a shelter, you know." The words struck like icy rain. Elena tried to compose herself, but her voice shook with fear and anger. "I'm taking care of them until I can get them proper homes. They were abandoned, left for dead in last night's storm. Please, Mrs. Gable, I just need a little time." Mrs. Gable's eyes narrowed. "If you cared about the rules, you wouldn't have taken in so many. Do you know how many complaints I file every year? About barking, about mess, about irresponsible pet owners? It's not just about you. It's about the whole neighborhood. If you don't comply, you'll be fined. And if Animal Services gets involved, you could lose all of them permanently." King, sensing the rising threat, moved between Elena and Mrs. Gable, his body rigid, head low. A quiet warning growl rose from his chest. Not a bark, but a clear message that he would tolerate no harm coming to Elena or the puppies. His eyes locked onto Mrs. Gable, unwavering, every sinew tense with silent warning. Mrs. Gable recoiled, her bravado briefly faltering. "You should keep that animal under control," she snapped, retreating a step but not backing down. "Aggressive dogs will be reported too." Elena knelt and placed a calming hand on King's broad back, whispering, "It's all right, boy. I've got this." But even as she spoke, her mind raced. The weight of Mrs. Gable's threats, the reality of neighborhood politics, and the cold certainty of local ordinances pressed in on all sides. If animal services came, there would be little she could do. Paperwork took weeks. The shelters were crowded. One complaint could mean the end for all of them. Bella whimpered softly from inside, her eyes wide with worry, as if she too could sense the tightening noose around their fragile sanctuary. Mrs. Gable, now emboldened again, snapped one final photo and strode briskly down the walk, phone pressed to her ear, voice sharp and commanding. Elena could hear her words drifting back through the open window. "Yes, I'd like to report an illegal number of unlicensed dogs. Yes, puppies too. At 207 Lincoln Avenue." As the door closed, Elena leaned against it, head bowed. She felt like the air had been sucked from the room, leaving her adrift in a sea of impossible choices. Fight and risk losing everything? Or give up and betray the trust she'd built with the animals who depended on her? Her thoughts churned. Calls to friends, hurried adoption pleas, flights of desperation she could barely organize in her panic. King stayed by her side, pressing his body into her legs, his presence a grounding force in the midst of chaos. Elena wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur, letting the tears come for just a moment. In that embrace, she felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about rules or complaints or the brittle power of HOA covenants. This was about justice, about compassion, about standing up for those who couldn't speak for themselves. Elena's heart pounded as she stood at the crossroads. Fight for the dogs, risking everything, or surrender to the machinery of bureaucracy and fear. That night, as shadows lengthened and quiet settled over the house, an unexpected crisis forced Elena and the dogs to face a danger even greater than Mrs. Gable's threats. The house was steeped in a heavy midnight stillness, shadows lying thick along the hallways and kitchen, the gentle rise and fall of sleeping dogs the only movement within its walls. Elena, finally surrendered to exhaustion, had let herself drift on the sofa, the rhythmic sound of puppy breaths and the faint ticking of the stove clock soothing her into uneasy dreams. Outside, the world was silent. No cars on the street, no voices, just the soft hush of wind against window glass. Sometime after 2, the hush was shattered by a sharp, urgent bark. King, who had been dozing at the foot of the couch, snapped awake, his ears pricked, nostrils flaring. For a split second, he seemed to listen to the faint, unnatural hiss coming from somewhere deep in the kitchen, to the low, mechanical whine that did not belong. He leaped onto the sofa, Paws landing squarely on Elena's legs, startling her out of sleep. "King?" Elena muttered, still tangled in a dream. But the dog was relentless. He barked twice, sharp, commanding, then jumped to the floor and scratched furiously at the closed bedroom door. Bella, sleeping with the puppies, was already on her feet, her body tense, lips drawn back in a rare, high-pitched whine that trembled with warning. The room filled with a sudden, unnatural dread. Elena struggled upright, rubbing her eyes. The air seemed heavier, tinged with a chemical edge that caught in her throat. Her head throbbed, her heart beginning to race as she became aware of a faint mechanical shriek slicing through the dark. The gas alarm. a sound she'd only heard in drills and commercials, was wailing from the kitchen. She staggered to her feet, dizzy, and stumbled toward the noise. King barreled ahead, his body a shield as he pawed at the kitchen door, then darted inside. Elena followed, the acrid smell growing stronger, prickling her nose and eyes. She fumbled for the lights, but the electricity had tripped. The moon cast everything in a surreal silver glow, turning the kitchen into a dreamscape of danger. Bella herded the puppies toward the hallway, nudging them one by one, her body curved protectively. King returned, grabbing Elena's sleeve in his jaws and tugging with all his strength, insistent, urgent. Okay, I'm coming, Elena gasped, her mind starting to clear as adrenaline flooded her system. She knelt by the stove and felt the cold rush of gas escaping from a loose valve. For a moment, panic seized her. She grabbed a towel, wrapped it around her hand, and twisted the valve shut. The hiss subsided, but the damage had been done. The air was thick with fumes, the alarm still blaring. Her thoughts spinning. Everyone out, she choked. Coughing, grabbing the first two puppies in her arms, King barked again, guiding Bella and the rest of the litter toward the back door, his entire body quivering with purpose. Elena wrenched open the door, the cold night air hitting her lungs like a blessing, and stumbled outside. She set the puppies on the porch, ran back for Bella and the last pup, then turned to see King circling, making sure no one was left behind. Once in the yard, Elena collapsed to her knees, hugging the dogs close. She looked back at the house, fear and relief battling in her chest. The night was so still now that it seemed impossible. In hindsight, that death had come so close, silent, invisible, and certain. If not for the dogs. Her breath came in ragged gulps, but her mind was clear. She stroked King's head, whispering shaky thanks. He leaned into her, warm and solid, his heartbeat a steady drum under her hand. Bella curled up on the grass, her nose pressed to the smallest puppy's back, her eyes never leaving Elena. The realization settled over Elena with shattering clarity. If King hadn't woken her, if Bella hadn't rallied the puppies, drawn her attention, kept them all together, she and every life in that house might have slipped quietly into oblivion before dawn. They had not only been saved by the dog's devotion, but by their uncanny, almost preternatural sense of danger. King's actions were not those of an ordinary dog, and Bella's leadership was nothing short of heroic. Elena's heart ached with gratitude and awe. She kissed King's muzzle, tears mingling with laughter as the tension bled away, replaced by fierce resolve. "You're not going anywhere," she whispered fiercely. "No one is taking you from me. I don't care what the law says." As the adrenaline faded, she became aware of voices and lights flickering across the street. The wail of the gas alarm and the commotion had not gone unnoticed. A neighbor peered out, phone pressed to her ear, already gossip and fear beginning to spiral through the block. King and Bella's talent for saving lives was no longer in doubt, and Elena's determination to protect her new family grew deeper, more unshakable than ever. Word of the incident swept through the neighborhood, drawing the attention of local officials, and making Elena and her rescued dogs the focus of growing scrutiny. The dawn after the gas leak was raw and unsettled. The sun barely pushed through the clouds, the front lawn still glistening with dew, but an anxious buzz already pulsed through the street. Elena stood at her window, arms crossed, her body weary but alert. Bella was curled protectively around her puppies on the living room rug. King stationed by the door as a vigilant sentry. Inside, the air still tasted faintly of danger, metallic and sharp, but it was nothing compared to the storm brewing outside. The commotion began with Mrs. Gable. As always, she was out early, whispering to neighbors on her porch, waving her phone with photos of last night's chaos. The details of the gas leak had already twisted in the retelling. One version claimed the dogs had triggered the alarm themselves. Another that Elena had lost control and endangered the block. It didn't matter that the truth was precisely the opposite. By 8 o'clock, a cluster of neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, their voices growing louder as they debated the fate of Elena's household. There was Mr. Sterling, who always complained about cars parked too close to his drive. Mrs. Vance, usually quiet, clutching her tote as if it were a shield. Two teenagers with phones out, recording the crowd with eager fascination. And there, front and center, was Mrs. Gable, her voice rising above the rest, righteous and unwavering. "These animals are a hazard. They've already caused a near disaster," she declared, gesturing wildly toward Elena's house. "If she won't act, then the city will. There are rules. There are laws." Elena felt her throat constrict. She opened the door, stepping onto the porch, her presence quieting the crowd for a heartbeat. "I'm taking care of them," she said, her voice steady but trembling just beneath. "They saved my life last night. King and Bella woke me when the gas was leaking. If it weren't for them, I might not be here at all." For a moment, her words seemed to ripple through the group. A few faces softened. Mrs. Vance hesitated, exchanging a glance with the teenagers. A soft murmur of agreement came from the back. "She's right," a young man in a blue hoodie said. "Those dogs aren't dangerous. They're heroes." But Mrs. Gable would not relent. "Heroics don't erase the law," she snapped. "Unlicensed dogs, stray animals, barking at all hours. What happens next time? What if a child gets hurt? What if there's another emergency?" More voices joined hers, emboldened by the momentum of anxiety and conformity. "It's not safe. What about the kids? We have to think about the whole neighborhood." The volume grew, the lines hardening, fear and suspicion against compassion and gratitude. King, sensing the rising tension, stepped onto the porch, his broad chest and sharp gaze making it clear he would not back down. He positioned himself between Elena and the crowd, tail still, muscles tense, every instinct trained on protecting his family. Bella watched from inside, her eyes never leaving Elena's silhouette. Suddenly, a woman from down the block, Miss Harper, who'd once lost her own dog to a car accident, stepped forward. "These animals saved her," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "If they hadn't, we'd be mourning a neighbor today, not having this argument." The group wavered, torn between the urge for order and the evidence of grace. But the majority, whipped into a lather by Mrs. Gable's persistence, remained resolute. "She's putting us all at risk," someone muttered. "It's not personal. It's the rules." Elena felt the tide turning against her, helpless and exposed. She hugged her arms tighter around herself as the crowd parted for a uniformed official, an animal services officer, clipboard in hand, eyes weary from years of disputes like this. He read from a prepared statement. Voice official and cold. "Miss Elena Vance, you are in violation of city ordinances regarding unlicensed animals and the keeping of strays. You are required to surrender the dogs to animal control within 24 hours. Failure to comply will result in fines and further action." The words crashed over Elena like a wave. For a moment, the world blurred. The faces of her neighbors, the watchful eyes of King and Bella, the whimpering of the puppies inside. She wanted to scream, to fight, to plead with every ounce of her being. But the machinery of the system was grinding forward, and she felt powerless to stop it. A small cluster of supporters lingered, exchanging worried glances. Miss Harper touched Elena's shoulder as the crowd dispersed. "Don't give up," she whispered. "You did the right thing. Maybe there's another way." As the morning wore on, the threat remained real, immediate, and suffocating. Elena sat on the steps, King's head in her lap. Bella pressed close. the puppies a tangle of warmth and vulnerability at her feet. She replayed the officer's words over and over, searching for loopholes. Hope. Anything that might let her keep the family she'd fought so hard to save. The injustice and peril mounted. And with the clock ticking, Elena received the official notice. She had 24 hours to give up the dogs or lose everything. Desperate and determined, Elena realized she couldn't do this alone. Her thoughts turned to Officer Morales, hoping for a lifeline in the dark. The afternoon sun was sinking, casting long slats of amber across the faded linoleum floor of the local police station. Elena sat on the bench just outside Officer Morales' office, her hands balled into anxious fists. King's leash wrapped tightly around her wrist. King lay at her feet, ever vigilant, his dark eyes trained on every movement in the station. Bella waited quietly in the car outside with the puppies, her calm steadiness offering Elena a faint thread of hope. The police station hummed with small-town routine, phones ringing, radios crackling, the low buzz of dispatchers and officers going about their business. Yet for Elena, the world had narrowed to the tight corridor of fear and hope she felt waiting to be called in. It was the last place she'd ever imagined herself, pleading not for her own freedom, but for the lives of the family she had come to love. At last, Morales appeared at the doorway, his expression curious but gentle. He waved her in. "Elena, come on in. Let's talk." She stepped inside, barely able to keep her voice from shaking as she sat opposite his desk. King settled at her side, refusing to be left out of arm's reach. The walls were lined with faded photos of the town, a calendar 2 months out of date, and a shelf crowded with citations for service above and beyond. Morales leaned back, his dark eyes softening with concern. "What's going on?" Elena drew a breath, the words nearly tumbling over each other as she began. "Officer, I need your help. The whole neighborhood is turning against me. After the gas leak, King and Bella saved my life. I swear. But now the neighbors are demanding the dogs be surrendered. Animal Services gave me 24 hours. If I don't comply, I lose everything. And they'll be taken away." She pushed the battered envelope across the desk. "This came to my house. It's from their former owner. Please just read it. It explains everything. Why they were abandoned. What these dogs have done. It wasn't neglect. It was fear and pressure and threats. King saved a child before. And Bella? She's protected those puppies through everything. They aren't just dogs. They're heroes. And they've done nothing wrong." Morales listened in silence, his features hardening with each detail. He flipped through the letter, reading the shaky, desperate handwriting. As he reached the final lines, his jaw clenched. He set the papers down and sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I believe you, Elena. I do. I know this town. Sometimes the rules are written by the loudest voices, not the most reasonable ones." Elena pressed on, her voice growing stronger. "There has to be another way. There has to be something I can do. I'll foster them. I'll pay whatever fines. Just don't let them end up in a shelter, please." For a long moment, Morales just looked at her, at the lines of fatigue and worry etched deep into her face, at King's quiet loyalty, at the trembling hope that shone despite everything. He glanced out the window at Bella's silhouette, pacing anxiously in the car. He let the silence linger, thinking. Finally, he straightened, his eyes clearing with purpose. "Elena, sometimes the only way to break through is to bring the truth into the light. You have the letter. You have the story. What happened to you? What happened to these dogs? It's not just your problem. It's a problem with the way we treat compassion. People need to see that." She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, let's go to the press. Bring this to the local news. Get your story on the record. If the community sees what really happened, how King and Bella have saved lives, how they were abandoned because of fear, not cruelty, maybe we can change some minds. Once it's public, it's a lot harder for officials to sweep it under the rug. You're not just fighting for your family now, Elena. You're fighting for every animal and every person caught in the crossfire between the rules and what's right. A surge of cautious hope swept through her, fragile but unmistakable. She nodded, her eyes filling. You think it could work? Morales smiled, a spark of his old warmth showing through. I do, but it won't be easy. There will be backlash. Some folks might dig in harder, but you'll have allies, and the truth on your side. I'll stand with you, as an officer, and as a citizen. Elena reached across the desk and shook his hand, gripping it with new determination. King, sensing the shift, thumped his tail against the floor, a low rumble of approval in his chest. They spent the next hour going over details, what to share, how to frame the story, who to contact. Morales promised to reach out to a friend at the local news, someone who cared about animal welfare. Elena rehearsed her story in her mind, wanting to make sure no detail of the dog's courage or the unfairness of the situation would be missed. As dusk began to fall, Elena stepped outside the station, King by her side, the wind lifting her hair and the weight of despair from her shoulders, if only a little. She glanced at the battered car, at Bella and the puppies peering anxiously from the back seat, and realized she wasn't alone anymore. There was a way forward, uncertain, daunting, but real. For the first time since the nightmare began, a new hope flickered to life amid the darkness. Lighting a path toward justice, Elena prepared herself to face the press. And sooner than she could imagine, the family who had once loved King, Bella, and the puppies would see it too. The sunlight streaming through Elena's living room windows had never seemed so blinding. The small house, once a quiet sanctuary, now buzzed with activity. Camera crews wrestling with cords, a reporter adjusting her lapel mic in the kitchen, Officer Morales standing at the edge of it all, his calm presence a quiet anchor. King lay by Elena's feet, dignified and attentive, while Bella curled protectively around her puppies, whose soft yips and sleepy squirming made even the most hard-nosed cameraman smile. Elena had barely slept. She paced, smoothing her hair, straightening the stack of letters on the coffee table, the battered envelope from the dog's previous owner resting atop the pile. She rehearsed the story again and again in her mind, determined to do justice to the sacrifice and loyalty of King, Bella, and their lost family. The interview began in a hush, the camera light blinking on. The reporter, Miss Cole, from the local affiliate, was perched on Elena's armchair. Elena, thank you for letting us into your home. Can you share what's been happening these last few days? Elena steadied her breath and looked into the camera, her voice clear but trembling with emotion. It started the night of the storm. I found King and Bella and their puppies abandoned on the highway. I couldn't leave them. They were cold, terrified, and hungry. King carried the smallest puppy in his mouth. I brought them home not knowing what else to do. She recounted the rescue, the gas leak, King's bravery in saving her life, and the loving devotion of Bella, how she'd tended her puppies, guarded the family, and even now seemed to sense every shift in mood or threat. Then Elena held up the letter, her hands shaking. I want everyone to see this. The dogs weren't abandoned because their owners didn't care. They were loved deeply. But pressure from neighbors, threats, legal notices, forced their family into an impossible choice. She read aloud the mother's words, about King saving a little girl from drowning, about the change from neighborhood hero to outcast, about the heartbreak of having to let go of those you love to keep them safe. The room fell silent, the hum of the camera barely louder than the thumping of Elena's heart. The puppies squirmed. And King, as if sensing the gravity, pressed his head into Elena's hand, eyes locked on hers. Miss Cole asked softly, "Why do you think this story matters?" Elena glanced down at King, then looked up, tears brimming. "Because compassion matters. Because animals aren't disposable. Because sometimes the law and justice aren't the same thing. King and Bella aren't just dogs, they're heroes. They saved me, and they saved a child before they ever met me. If we give up on them, what does that say about us as a community?" Morales stepped in, sharing the official perspective. "As an officer, I'm often tasked with enforcing regulations. But I also believe in fairness. This is about more than rules. It's about what kind of town we want to be. I hope Elena's courage reminds us all to look beyond paperwork to the beating hearts we're supposed to protect." The story aired that evening, and within hours, Elena's phone was flooded with calls, emails, and messages, some offering donations, others volunteering to help. The video of King barking out the gas alarm and Bella shepherding the puppies to safety went viral on local social media. Neighbors who had once scowled from their porches now left anonymous notes of encouragement. "Keep fighting. Thank you for not giving up. We're with you." A local animal welfare group started an online petition to halt the forced surrender. Within a day, thousands of signatures poured in. People shared stories of their own rescues, their dogs' heroics, and their gratitude for second chances. The tide of public opinion, once threatening to wash Elena away, now rose to buoy her above the storm. Still, not all the attention was welcome. Protesters appeared holding signs, "Rules matter. No more strays." But they were now outnumbered by those holding handmade posters. "Let them stay. King is our hero. Families belong together." The city. Council, feeling the pressure, called for a review. The animal services officer who had delivered the surrender notice now arrived with a box of donated food and quietly muttered, "I hope it works out for you." For the first time, Elena began to believe that hope might triumph over fear. Amid the whirlwind of attention, one face stood apart from the crowd outside Elena's door. A man, pale and trembling, clutching a photo of King and Bella from long ago. The original owner of the dogs had finally come forward, bringing with him a secret that no one, not even Elena, could have imagined. The evening light stretched long shadows across the front walk as the crowd thinned, the day's storms of anger and compassion settling into a tense, quiet calm. Elena stood just inside her open door. King pressed against her hip, Bella waiting at her feet, the puppies a sleepy tangle of fur behind her. From the edge of the sidewalk, an older man approached slowly, his steps hesitant, face drawn and pale beneath a battered ball cap. He clutched a photograph in shaking hands. When he reached the stoop, he paused, his body racked by a sob so deep Elena felt it in her own bones. "I'm sorry," he managed, voice raw, barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry. My name is Robert Hayes. I was their owner." The world seemed to narrow to a single point. Elena's fingers tightened in King's fur. She searched Hayes's face, finding only grief and remorse. He looked from Elena to the dogs and back again, tears tracking down weathered cheeks. "I saw the news. I saw what you did for them, and what they did for you. I know you must hate me. I deserve it." His voice broke and he knelt, arms dropping helplessly to his sides. "But please, let me tell you why." The neighborhood, so recently a cauldron of suspicion, now watched in silence as Hayes gathered himself. "It started last winter. My daughter, she's all I have, fell through the ice at Miller Creek. I thought I'd lost her. King went in after her, and Bella barked until we found them. They saved her, no question. His breath caught. But after the press left, the threats started. People called us dangerous, said the dogs were too big, too loud, a menace. Someone left dead rats on our porch. My daughter had nightmares. Hayes's shoulders slumped, the weight of memory almost too much to bear. I tried to fight. I really did. But when I got the letter, "If you don't get rid of them, you'll regret it," I panicked. My wife was gone. I had no family, nowhere else to go. The landlord said we'd be evicted. My daughter begged me not to let them go. But I was scared. I thought, maybe if I left them somewhere public, someone good would find them. You. He covered his face with his hands, overcome by shame and grief. Elena's heart was a storm. Anger at the injustice, the cowardice, the pain inflicted on the innocent. Compassion for a father's impossible choice. She remembered the first night. King carrying the smallest puppy. Bella's unwavering gaze. She thought of the letter, its pleas for forgiveness echoing through every action since. She opened her mouth, not sure what would come out, reproach or comfort. But King moved first. With a low, tentative whine, he padded across the porch, pausing just in front of Hayes. For a moment, the man flinched, expecting judgment, but King only pressed his head gently against Hayes's knee, tail swishing in a slow, forgiving rhythm. Bella followed, her own eyes shining with memory, licking Hayes's trembling hand in a gesture of peace that cut through the last of his defenses. Tears spilled freely down his face as he wrapped his arms around both dogs, holding them as if to tether himself to something good again. The watching neighbors murmured, some dabbing at their eyes, others shifting uncomfortably, but the tide of public opinion for once was with Mercy. The cruelty of circumstance, the courage of love, the sheer resilience of these animals, all of it was laid bare. Elena knelt beside them, her anger dissolving into the shared sorrow that bound them all. "I don't hate you," she whispered. "I can't. None of this should have happened." But it did. Now we have to decide what's best for them. For your daughter. For you. For me. For all of us. Hayes nodded, his face streaked with gratitude and regret. "You're right. I want what's best. If that means letting them stay with you, I'll step aside. I only want to see them safe, loved, and whole again." King and Bella seemed to understand, pressing closer to both humans, tails thumping, a wordless pledge that forgiveness was possible, even in the aftermath of heartbreak. In Elena's living room, they reached a decision, one shaped not by guilt or fear, but by a shared love. Hayes would visit. But the dogs had found their new home with Elena, and together, they would fight to keep it. The decision forged in Elena's living room quickly blossomed into something much larger, a movement, a beacon of hope that radiated outward, touching lives in unexpected ways. Elena and Mr. Hayes poured their hearts into founding the Midwest Animal Guardians, a group as grassroots as it was passionate. Their first meeting was held in Elena's kitchen, with King and Bella dozing at their feet, and the puppies tumbling around the chairs. Soon, the group partnered with local schools and the town library. Elena and Hayes were invited to speak to students, children who clung to every word, wide-eyed. As Elena described that rainy night, it was at Maple Grove Elementary that the magic truly took hold. One morning, during a classroom visit, a teacher quietly pulled Elena aside. "There's someone I'd like you to meet." In the corner sat Sophie, a young girl with deep brown hair and solemn eyes, hands knotted tightly in her lap. Sophie had been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, and for months had retreated further into silence. Elena knelt beside Sophie, offering her a gentle smile. Bella, sensing the girl's trepidation, approached with measured grace, lying down just close enough for Sophie to reach. For long moments, nothing happened. Then, as if by silent agreement, Sophie's fingers stretched out, brushing Bella's fur. The dog remained perfectly still, her deep, calm eyes locking with Sophie's. A hush fell over the room as the little girl, breathless and blinking, began to stroke Bella's side. The movement slow and hesitant, but growing in confidence with each passing second. Over the next weeks, Sophie's world began to shift. She started speaking, first to Bella, then to Elena, then in halting phrases to her classmates. Her mother wept in Elena's arms after one visit. "I thought I'd never hear her laugh again. Your dog did what no therapy or medicine could." The story of King, Bella, and the puppies swept through the community like wildfire. News outlets followed up with glowing features, and animal shelters across the country reported a surge in adoptions. But the final battle remained. The town hall meeting that would decide the fate of local animal laws. The city auditorium was ablaze with light and color, every seat filled. Neighbors, teachers, families, city officials, and reporters. Elena sat with King at her feet, his calm presence a grounding force. Beside her, Robert Hayes fidgeted with his notes, and Officer Morales leaned forward, his eyes never leaving the faces of the assembled council. The debate grew heated. Words like public safety and property values ricocheted around the room. Elena felt the sting of every accusation, but she stood her ground. Then, just as hope seemed to wane, Mrs. Gablonce, the symbol of opposition, climbed the steps to the stage. The crowd went silent, all eyes on the woman whose phone calls and complaints had nearly doomed the dogs. She stood before Elena and Hayes, voice quivering as she spoke into the microphone. "I was wrong," she said simply, tears welling in her sharp eyes. "I let my fear turn to anger, and I took it out on my neighbors, and on these animals. I see now what I couldn't see then, that forgiveness isn't about forgetting, but about letting go of what holds us back. I want to do better. I want to help you, to help the dogs." The words hung in the air, raw and humbling. Elena reached for Mrs. Gable's hand, and in that gesture, soft, hesitant, but genuine, the stadium erupted in applause and tears. The vote was called, and the verdict was clear. The city would rewrite its animal welfare ordinances. Red tape would be cut, compassionate action protected. The chamber erupted in cheers, strangers embracing, children clapping, dogs barking in joyous confusion. For Elena, King, and everyone who had fought so long, it felt as if a great weight had finally lifted. Sunlight shimmered through the canopy of oaks in the city park, dappling the grass with gold as families gathered for a community picnic unlike any the town had seen. The energy was joyous, children racing each other across the lawn, picnic blankets dotted with food and laughter, and in the center of it all, the family of dogs who had united the town. The puppies had grown into lively, affectionate companions. Over the past weeks, each had found a home, chosen by families who understood the meaning of patience and second chances. Bella moved with calm grace from group to group, letting children hug her neck and stroke her ears, her presence as comforting as a warm blanket. King had become a celebrity in his own right, a regular visitor at schools and nursing homes. Everywhere he went, he inspired a sense of wonder. It was during the picnic that King's gift shone brightest one last time. A flurry of shouts broke the cheerful hum. A little boy missing from his parents' sight was lost among the maze of trees. Panic rippled through the crowd. Elena's heart seized, but King was already in motion, nose low, tail high, weaving purposefully through the park. Within minutes, he emerged from the underbrush. The boy's hand grasped gently in his jaws, leading him straight to his mother's waiting arms. The cheers that erupted carried across the park, mingling relief, pride, and a fresh sense of awe. Tears streamed down cheeks as people gathered. not just to celebrate King, but to honor the spirit he embodied. Night fell softly over Elena's little house, drawing a hush that felt sacred after so many months of noise, worry, and hope. Elena sat by her kitchen window, the faint golden pool of a table lamp casting gentle shadows across her open journal. Outside, the moonlight made the dew shimmer on the grass. Now the world was quiet, except for the soft tick of her pen against the page. She wrote slowly, letting memory guide her hand. She revisited every turn in their journey. The icy rain, the desperate hope in King's eyes, the trust Bella placed in a stranger's arms, the gas leak, the letter, the victory. Elena paused, looking up as Bella shifted on her blanket near the fireplace, drawing two puppies closer with her warm, steady nose. King, ever the sentinel, lifted his head from his paws and watched Elena for a moment, before crossing the room and settling by her feet. With a grateful sigh, she reached down, feeling the solidity of his skull, the deep, contented rumble of his breath, and marveled at how this once-abandoned family had become the heartbeat of her own life. She wrote for herself, but also for those who might one day need reminding. The storms will come, but so will the shelter. You only need to open your door. Just as she set her pen aside, King lifted his head and gently placed it across her knees, his dark eyes searching hers, full of something that felt like understanding and peace. Elena smiled through tears she didn't try to hide. Bella, sensing the shift, nosed her puppies into a heap and curled her body protectively around them. Together they sat in the warmth and stillness. Hearts healed, spirits joined, savoring the quiet after so many storms. Elena, King, Bella, and the puppies, a true family at last.